Hello, welcome to Shad Live. Couple of things here. One, I put a 180 millimeter rotor on there and the wheel won't fit. So I was wrong. This fork actually accommodates 160 millimeters. I don't know why, but when I saw the 160 rotor in there, visually it looked like there was way too much space, like it wasn't grabbing right. But actually, the reality is that was just fine. Um, and the 180 doesn't fit. The thing is I want a 180 millimeter rotor on the front. I don't want a 160 rotor. It doesn't make sense. So I'll either put the adapter, which I believe I have on this fork, but before I do that, I've been thinking the last couple of days ever since I built this. What I don't like is that this fork has put this bike to its most extreme slack point with 27.5 wheels on it. So it gives me no room to play with. I can't really mullet this bike or MX build it, whatever you want to call it, because if I do that, then it gets way too slack. I already know that I don't like 63.5 degree. I don't like bikes that are that slack, hardtails. I like them to be more around 65, 66 degrees. So, um, I have a couple of 120 millimeter 29er forks on bikes over here, so I'm probably gonna try the MRP Raven just because I want to see what the black looks like on here too. Um, Off of my Esker Jaffe over here, and I'm just gonna throw it on here, do some geometry measurements. I also believe that fork is the one of my forks. It starts at 180 millimeter rotor, and you can't go down to a 160. It doesn't. I don't know these days who runs a 160 millimeter rotor on the front. Like, yeah, I don't really see that too often. Maybe on road bikes, right, or gravel bikes, but not on mountain bikes. Anyway, I'm gonna go switch the fork over, and we'll do some measurements and see what the geometry is like. Because um, I just saw that Marzocchi has the Bomber Z2 fork on sale right now, really cheap. And I'm like, well, I can get either a 100 millimeter travel 29er fork or a 120 millimeter travel fork. So I want to see what a 120 millimeter does. And if it doesn't steepen the head angle and drop the bottom bracket enough for me to be able to play around with setting this bike up as a mullet, I might go with the 100 millimeter travel. Because again, I just don't feel like I need that much suspension. I certainly don't need 140 millimeter. So yeah, let me play around here, and I'll be back and we'll talk about the numbers. Okay, so first off, that looks a lot better. I mean, I thought the blue was pretty cool, but I feel like if I was to do blue, I'd want like some other blue accents along here. But I like the black. I think it kind of keeps the look of the bike going. The other thing is I did measure the head angle, and it came to 64.5 degrees, which is still pretty slack, more slack than I want it to be, especially since I haven't even tried mullet yet. That's with the 27.5 wheels, both front and rear. And so then if I mulleted this bike, it would be even more slack. So I'm really glad I did this. This fork is definitely not staying on this bike. I just took it off and the Jaffe to try it. This fork will go back on the Jaffe here in a minute, but this allows me to do some measurements before I go buy anything. So now, if I'm thinking that I'm gonna get a degree of steepness, is that how we want to say it? For every 20 millimeters I drop in fork, as long as I stick with a 29-inch wheel compatible fork, which I have to if I want to try mullet, right? So I'm going to see if Marzocchi still has the Z2 Bomber 29er fork with 100 millimeters of travel. That seems kind of weird, but I mean, that's basically almost like having a DJ fork, right? 100 millimeters of travel is pretty standard. And this is the low side. And then the other thing is I'll have to maybe reconsider what I do with the handlebars. I mean, I don't know. I'll have to see. If the front end keeps dropping down, do I want to stick with a traditional mountain bike bar, or do I want to go back to the Surly Sunrise bars? We'll have to see how everything feels and so on. But yeah, that's going to be my plan. I think I'm going to order that 100 millimeter Bomber Z2 fork for this bike, and it's going to be pretty much specific to this bike, because then what that'll allow me to do is when I run these wheels, I will be able to have about a 65.5 degree head angle. Then when I set it up mullet, you know, it'll probably be 64.5 to 64 degrees or something like that, right? And then I still have the GeoShift wolf tooth headset, so I can play around with that, and I don't have to worry about the bottom bracket getting too high. So there's all these things. Trying to maintain a good geometry when you're doing changes like this is pretty important. I don't want to make the bike just ride super funky. So if I get that Z2 fork, I'll have to check to see if it's still available. I mean, it was yesterday, so hopefully it still is. If I get that, that'll really allow me to truly play around with different combinations on this bike like I like to do, and experiment with it, kind of like what I did with the Esker frame last year. So cool. I love the low side, so all of this that I'm talking about is cool and all, but I will absolutely keep the original fork and handlebars so I can shred this thing in its original form, just because it's such a fun bike that way. Fully rigid. There has been one more thing I'm going to add here before I finish this video. Because that fork isn't suspension adjusted, it makes this a 70 degree head angle, which is pretty steep and great for like urban riding and, you know, things like that, and I like it. But I was looking at Surly Karate Monkey forks. If you watch the video I did, how many years has it been now? 3 years, 4 years since I got this? One of the things I commented on was that I didn't really like the style of this fork, that it does this bend forward. I think it would be much cooler, especially since Surly is trying to go with BMX kind of theme, if they had a more traditional straight fork with a forward dropout like a BMX fork would have, right? This bend, and then having it just doesn't work for me. It's always kind of bugged me. Karate Monkey fork, what they do is they add rake to the fork, but it's a straight tube at least. So, and then it's also suspension corrected for about 100 millimeters. So that would mean I could swap out a rigid fork, and, you know, not have the geometry drastically change between swapping from a suspension fork to a rigid fork. So that's just a thought that I've been having. But whether I do that or not is a whole nother story, or whether it's worth it. I actually like how the bike rides when it's at its 70 degree head angle with this fork. So yeah, who knows? Just some thoughts that I've been thinking. It's what I do in the wintertime. Get bored. It's like, it was -8 degrees this morning, so I tend to sit around and tinker with this stuff. I appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace. And for those of you that were really excited about the 140 millimeter fork, don't worry. I have all the parts. I will definitely ride the bike in this configuration and let you know what I think. There you have it.